topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
Hi, welcome everyone. It's Arthi with Light Up Your Life. And can you believe it's another Friday, how time keeps rolling? I think sometimes we think time's going to stand still and it just keeps a rolling. I just wanted to share with you all, if you are interested in going on to our website for the Holistic Life Care, we're still making some modifications to it, but you can check out all the services that we're providing and continuing to add. If you watched the episode from last week or watched the record, brain health has become an extreme passion of mine. So over time, I really am wanting to add the brain health coach certification also as part of our the services we provide. And in that episode, I shared with you how important it is to pay attention to this vital organ that is the driving force for everything. I also want to let you know to enjoy and soak up the sun when you can. And again, there's a lot of things happening around our world, so just pay attention to how you're feeling in all the different moments and where they take you. So it's the second week of the month, and usually Daria Williams Fernandez comes on our show, or someone from the team, the Pause team. And just to remind you, Pause is a great organization that Daria founded to really help through the lifespan in different ways to provide transformative education. And she also is a funeral director and wears many different hats, also an art coach as well, and a life coach as well, and has found many passions to engage the clients and the families that she works with. And I'm excited always to work with her because she is our strategic alliance partner. So today with Daria, we're going to be exploring the concept of pre-planning and what that looks like. That's a huge passion of hers in the funeral industry, is to start helping individuals and families start to plan early. For me too, it has become an extreme passion to help find ways to make it so that we can plan ahead of time, because what ends up happening in those ending moments is we don't necessarily know what our loved one really wanted, and then the finances come into play. And so we'll be exploring a lot of different concepts today, and so excited for this conversation. Welcome, Daria.
Well, thank you, Arthi, once again for inviting me here. And it's always exciting to take this moment to honestly bring you all into a little bit of what I experience on a day-to-day, but additionally, what, like you said, is a passion of mine, just because I see what people are going through because they're not taking the steps to pre-plan. So I appreciate the conversation today and exciting questions that might come out of it. And hopefully I'll dispel some of the myths or something like that as well.
And Daria, it has become a focus too right now, because the fact is that funeral arrangements are at a sky-high price, not just because of COVID. We see where the inflation is happening, period, with this whole piece. And in my mind, if it's something that we know is going to happen, like anything, why don't we start to engage ourselves in that conversation? And because, even when you feel like you know your family, you don't really know what they want for those end moments until you have courageous conversations. You could feel like you know them, but we never
Yeah.
know to the deepest seed what really somebody would want.
For sure, for sure. And I think it's those hard talk conversations that need to be had at certain periods in our life. And, I usually say, and I do these seminars, throughout the Boston and basically Massachusetts area. And the thing is, you realize that, people are wanting to have the conversations, but they don't want to necessarily have them with the person that they need to have them with. It's always about asking others, even asking myself as a funeral director, in reference to guidance or direction or where to go or what to do with things. But at the same time, the right people still need to know where those things are or what your thought process is, and to be able to meet the wishes and have the contingency plan if things were to be, different at the end of the day. So I think it's really important for people to step out and have those hard talk conversations. And sometimes it's crazy. Like in my family, we'll have like one question at Thanksgiving or different holidays that represents something that brings out an aspect of them that they want to want shined in their obituary at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So it's just each person going around and sharing that one thing, but how they share it could be, in any way. So I think that's one thing that I'd love for other families to be able to do. And it could be something like, who was, say, one person who's inspired you in your life. You know what I mean? So then when it shows up in the obituary and it's not them, you know what I mean? They're not surprised at the end of the day. But I think they'll also know the why and understand why that person's in the obituary. But I think it's also making sure that your values are being represented in your funeral service, because if it's, a lot of people think about funeral service and it's like, oh, it's the person who's passed away. And it is giving reverence and significance and shining the light on that life. But at the same time, you do have to recognize that the service itself is then for the living. And so that person or that family and, has to really figure out, well, how am I going to move beyond today? And so figuring that out can be somewhat of a challenge in itself when you're the only one in the moment. And so I think, finding out different ways to just know each other better. It's being intentional about asking the questions to your grandmother, where she was born and were her parents married and what's her maiden name? And, because all those things show up on the death certificate, forget about the obituary, right? And then outside of that, knowing about her beginnings and her history and things like that might be able to help you understand, the journey your family's taken over the years and why things are the way they are or the way they're not, you know what I mean? And I think that's an aspect of really grabbing on to what life's all about. And it's not necessarily about death, you know what I mean? It's really about the life. But we get caught up in the whole death part. It's so taboo, that we can't really get ourselves to moving into, honestly, the aspects of our legacy, at the end of the day.
Totally.
So.
And Daria, the thing is, we see it left and right, especially in this past 15 months, regardless of, but we still can't seem to have these conversations. What do you think's holding us back? Because this is part of that idea and the pre-planning that we have to be able to do it. But I do think there's something holding folks back. I mean, I have my own theory that I'll share, but I was curious from you.
Right. Well, the thing is, I mean, there's always the religious, cultural, traditional kind of things that just happen within the family dynamic itself. But then at the same time, I think when you're talking about during a pandemic, I think, death is at the forefront. And so it's one of those things you're not really wanting to keep journeying down. You're trying to be positive. You're trying to keep yourself there. But, when you're saying that, people aren't, I think that there's a lot of people that are pre-planning right now. And it's not necessarily for themselves. It could be for others because they recognize the age of others now that they didn't necessarily recognize before for some strange reason, and so they're taking the steps to kind of get things in order. They've heard everybody else's stories. They're trying to have like some leverage on things. And it's an opportunity to try to control a possible unknown. But at the same time, there's the mind that, yes, right, don't want to meet it, don't want to even think about those things and try to keep things positive. And we tell them too, you know what I mean? So it's like, well, what else am I supposed to do? But I think that the other aspect of, prearrangement is that there's a concern that people think that they have to pay or put money down or do any of those type of things. And it holds them back from thinking that they just need to get their wishes written down on paper. You know what I mean? And I mean, some people don't need to necessarily come and get everything in order at the funeral home, but like, did you get any of the other things in order in reference to your estate? And an estate is not a big old grandioso something, you know what I mean? It could be something as simple as china that's been in your cabinet, but you know what? It was in your grandmother's cabinet too. And like, is there some value to it? Like you see those antique shows, you know what I mean? You'd be like, you never know what you have, but additionally your voice and your value system. And I think expressing that for that next generation is important in itself too. And, sometimes you might have a little something like an insurance policy, but you don't have a child. So you say to yourself, well, what do I do with that money after anyway? And maybe you put it to some kind of foundation, or you start a foundation, or you put it towards education, or maybe you put it towards a ministry within your church so that it all goes in line with your value systems at the end of the day. And so I think it's really important to try to figure out, in advance who you are, you know what I mean? To really get to even that level of things. And so I think when we're pushing this, like being mindful and, getting to know yourself and the I am in it, it's really important because it takes us all the way through, this life, how we walk it, but then additionally how it sustains itself beyond us at the end of the day. And I think that's what, any energy source would want us to do at the end of the day, to be able to is to know that if we're reaching, if that energy can hit and reach that next one and reach that next one, how bad could that be? So I definitely think it's important.
There's a couple of things that you said that resonated. I think the first is when you use the word estate, I think estate gets magnified, that people think estate means like the rich, the famous, like 10 properties plus a beach house plus millions of dollars in there. So for you to debunk the myth that an estate is actually what you leave behind, period. So everybody actually has an estate. It varies in size, and that's pretty much the way that I look at it, right?
Bottom line, it could be your hashtag. It could be your hashtag. You see what I'm saying? That's your legacy right there. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, so you're not even recognizing that little hashtag. I look at that as totally something so much bigger than what some people are using it as. You know what I mean? And it's like, what could you do with a hashtag that could travel through and touch so many lives and change them because they read those words? Whoa. Is that like the Bible? That's crazy. You know what I mean? Like almost like you read the words and now you were like, oh, geez. I love it. You know what
I
I mean?
love
So
it.
it's, I think it's using just those simple things and recognizing that that's how you speak beyond you and live beyond you. And like, sometimes people can't, and I recommend people trying to get some kind of trust, if they have a large house and things like that.
Mhm.
But when we're talking about like a legacy and just putting together a will, and that will speaking to your values, you know what I mean, and who you were as a person or are as a person, or want to make sure lasts beyond you, or that that next generation picks up and like it hands you, takes your baton and kind of just keeps running the race for you. What is that? You know what I mean? And it doesn't have to be anything. I even say to people, it's simple as a smile. Like, are you the lady in the hallway that's always smiled at me?
Yes.
So, definitely important. Definitely important.
Yeah. And Daria, while you're speaking, it also resonated. Yes. Oh, sorry. I couldn't. There's a lag. Um, it just speaks volumes what you're talking about. Like nothing you're saying is about monetary value, right? That of course goes in itself, but I think the other part is so many people feel like they wish they had time to volunteer, but they actually can. What is something that holds meaning and value to you that you could leave behind? And it doesn't have to be a huge amount of money, right? But if you have a small savings and you want that to go towards a particular, then that can be your value set. And if that is also that idea in your mind, I feel like will hold you to saying, I am serving by doing
Yes,
this. And so that
definitely.
pressure that people feel like, I wish I could do more. I wish I could do more. And maybe it's not your time to do more. Maybe you're just trying to live so presently and make ends. Or so I
It's
just want
all
to, I don't know
everything.
about you. I mean,
Yeah.
every day.
I think everything has a season, you know what I mean? And it's really recognizing that your time for what you're doing right now in your life is, you need to embrace it. You know what I mean? At whatever size it is, whatever increment it is, whatever, you know what I mean, length of it. You just need to recognize that, what you have is what you're supposed to have right now, but it's what you're doing with what you have. You know what I mean? And then how do you keep pushing, pushing, pushing? And it's starting with your voice a lot of the times is what you have, you know what I mean? And then as your voice grows, you establish now that, place for that voice to go and speak, right? And then where it goes and speaks, it then moves into the next level, right, of reaching out to others and how it reaches out to others, and it's just really looking at your life and how you're going to incrementally get through those different steps so that the you can shine at the other end at the end of the day, and not thinking that you got to be 50 people. I think sometimes it's really just grab onto what you're good at, you know what I mean, and then explore the things you're not good at, because it gives you so much value in and enrich, thought process as you move forward. But I think prearrangement is one of the most difficult things if we're talking about embracing, the who I am, is writing your own obituary. You know what I mean? I always say, listen, start off with this. Write your own obituary, because why? It's your resume. That's your resume at the end of the day, so really, what does your resume right now in life reflect? And then as time progresses, guess what you're going to add into it? More things that you end up doing, and how that led to who you are at the end of the day. And maybe some things were who you weren't, but that's how you knew who you were, is because you now know you didn't.
Yes.
Jive with whatever that was, that occupation or whatever the case may be. But I think it speaks,
Daria, you're
funeral
reminding
service
me.
speaks so much. Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're reminding me of how, lately everybody wants to be famous, right? Why do we all love Instagram and Facebook? I want to be famous, right?
I
We
am
all
so
want to
good,
be.
yeah.
We all
I
want to be
try.
authors. We all want to be authors. So you just prompted me to think, when you write your own obituary, your own life story, you are your author because you are the one who created this life, right?
This is
And
it.
I'm just sitting here imagining how it would feel. Like, I think about my best friend wrote my mom's obituary. She's a beautiful writer, but what would my mom want to, like, while we're sitting here, I'm having this reflection, what would she have really wanted in her own obituary?
This is
You
it.
know, you'll
This
never
is
know,
it.
right? And so
This
having
is
you
it.
write your own, as like,
It means so much. So that's part of like the steps that when you're getting an opportunity to prearrange things, you have that opportunity to have a conversation with that funeral director, hopefully that's a little bit more, open to this kind of thing, because some have their own scope. Every funeral home has their own scope of practice. You know what I mean? But as more women come into play, we're probably seeing a little bit more branching out of things. But then also the end of life doula, people that do prearrangement. Those are people that are now looking at life, in its entirety, and trying to link up with a funeral home that will guide you to starting those thought processes. But sometimes you're connecting with that funeral home so late in life, it's hard to want to even embrace it when you're 65, you know what I mean? Because who knows what other ailments or things like that that's starting creeping on you where you're like, I don't even want to think about that, So honestly, like at Pause, we have a opportunity where you can take a moment to really write your own obituary and sit and go through with me, you know what I mean? The different steps, the things that are in the traditional obituary. And then we broaden it out to like the who I am. And it kind of, pinpoints where you are today, you know what I mean? As opposed to where you'll be through the end. But then it also, we go back and we talk about the future us, you know what I mean? And what you wanted to see. And sometimes I actually like to start with the future you, right? And then it's like, let's now look at where we at, that reality, right? And we kind of try to walk towards where we want to be. But it's a weird vision board. So I have to be honest with you. It's like, and I try to put some light on it, but at the same time, it's definitely the different experience as well. But I think it speaks for you. It definitely.
Totally. As morbid as it sounds, it's so exciting to be able. I'm like sitting here and I'm like, I just want some moments like to do this, because what's happening is, for those people who feel like, God, I haven't done enough with my life. When you really look at your timeline, however old you are, even a 15-year-old, if we made if we had your sense of accomplishment and what you have done. And even to not negate the fact that even having a family or loved ones is enough to know that you being loved by somebody.
I know. Yeah, I know this is true, because even the lives that are taken so short from our opinion, you know what I mean? You should read the life story or hear the different remarks that are given and the reflections that are given about these people. And it's like, oh my gosh, like so short time, but hit it on the nose. You know what I mean? So it just speaks to, having that opportunity to sit and write that, about self. And then additionally, a lot of times our family members know us pretty well, you know what I mean? But when we're talking about like the why you did what you did when you did what you did, you know what I mean? Like, even like your journey, Arthi, you are into so many different, courses or, getting degree and things like that. And
so
it's
crazy.
like, well, why did, yay, right. But welcome, right? Exactly. So, but at the same time, I think it's lining up why you did those and why that package speaks to your purpose and who you are as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, as a community member, as a practitioner in general. So I think it's one of those things where, taking that moment to just say, yo, I'm going to go and check out this obituary writing thing because it's a little crazy, but I'm a little crazy. Join us, right? We can do
Yes,
this.
totally. And this is what does set pause apart from when you talk about transformative education, writing your own obituary could and I'm sitting here thinking about the experience that people can have in a collective room to do together, and
Yes.
how just being in that setting, whether it be on Zoom or in person, what it could really, really do. Daria,
Yeah.
my theory on fear of pre-planning is because not only does death have a negative connotation, I think people
Yeah.
are so just fear, but the thing is, I always say we are also creatures. We're animals. We have a beginning, middle, and end. And then you can think
Yeah.
of yourself as being a beautiful butterfly who just immerses throughout our life. It just inevitably
Yeah.
makes. And those who are spiritual, religious folks, they do have some grounding in thinking, okay, I do have some eternal home beyond here. And that sometimes
Right.
grounds people. Whatever it is, I
Right.
think we
Yeah.
have to remember the fear is legit, but doing these things is not undermining your fear. It's just that if you plan, I'd say if you meal plan, why can't we plan
Hello.
for this thing
Hello. I
that's
know it
happening?
doesn't.
Like,
There
let's
is
get
so
there.
much. I mean, there's a lot of taboo behind it. I don't think, honestly, funeral industry over the years has helped it, in reference to embracing the psychology and the sociology aspects of, funeral service, and how for us to bridge that gap between, where the taboo is, between their understanding and the reality, or additionally the inevitability of things, I think becomes something that is difficult for people, and it's honestly, as a funeral director, is difficult for me. Have I placed it in where I feel comfortable? You know what I mean? I think, yes, I think I've done that. But at the same time, I still feel that it's important for, you know, people to try comfort zone, right? Bottom line, when you're in the uncomfortable zone, that's when you move, you know what I mean? And that's when you make some power moves. When you get, like, for me, getting diagnosed with a disease, it was like, okay, I need to do some adapt and a little shaky, a little bit. Did I get the policy right? Did I do that all? Is everything in order? I'm not going anywhere, but it's like the insurance policy. You know what I mean? You pay it, you pay it, you pay it. Hopefully nothing happens, right? But at the same time, if something did, right? And it's just kind of taking prearrangement and looking at it from that aspect, as opposed to, looking at it as this, I'm in inducing or, invoking my death, like I'm
It's
bringing
not a
on
self-fulfilling
doomsday.
prophecy.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
not a
It's crazy. But
self-fulfilling
I mean,
prophecy.
right. And a lot of people think that. And it's like, no, and families even feel it. It's like, okay, she's in the hospital. I'm not going over to the funeral home, even though they're telling me, because if I go over to the funeral home, she's going to die. And then what? And it's like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, then if you want to take emotion and try to do some business kind of aspects of things at the same time, that becomes hard for anybody to deal with, right? Like, if I lose my mom, I don't want to go to a funeral home. No, number one, I don't want to go there, right? Then when I get there, I definitely don't want some lady asking me about a whole bunch of questions, right? And then to go look at some caskets. This is not what I want to do. You know what I mean? So, and guess what? There's no want, right? It's a need. It's a need piece, right? So when you go into the funeral home, it's on a thought of a needs base, right? And then adding the different things on that you want to. Sometimes, women are doing prearrangement more than men, you know what I mean? Because we're like, we're not going to leave the kids like that. We kind of do that pre-thinking kind of deal anyway. And so we'll make the prearrangements for our children so that, you know, everything's in order. And it's like talk about a value system. When your mother has done that, everybody in the room's like, Mom was on point. She was always handling things. Bum, 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 bum. Like it's a lesson that just came from heaven. You know what I mean? In reference to it is. And I think it's just about keeping, you know, your life in order in those different aspects of things. But I think you're going to find the pushback from anybody, you know what I mean, to have those conversations. Do you want to have the conversation when it's now at the forefront or prior to? And so going out and trying to get those younger minds is what Pause is trying to do by trying to grasp them into the obituary thought process. But then also we try to reframe it, as you can see, more into like a vision board aspect of things, and just having that one journal that just kind of create the shift over your mindful shift. But I think that with the transformative education on my end, and then additionally on your end, putting things into application is key too. At the same time, to kind of keeping things going.
Yeah.
Sure.
I just thought of it. You know, you and I talk a lot about journaling. We always are huge believers in journaling in general, but I just had this vision of getting yourself a really cool journal. And we all have like 30 journals. We just forget that they're in there. But you like having this ongoing life legacy, like you don't have to call it an obituary, like this life legacy, but that you keep modifying, and how proud you would feel of all your accomplishments, your dreams, and all of it. So you're being, because I feel like so many people right now, like anyone who's listening or tuning, like we just know it is a very difficult time in our world, in our country, in our world, globally.
For sure.
It is a very challenging time. So what can you hold on to besides, you know, you and I always talk about taking steps out in nature and being out in nature, but what can you do that can also provide you? And so the journal movement through this living legacy of like writing out but in an obituary form it's just so beautiful. I'm just like, I have.
And how you do an obituary it can be different too. You know, like me, I'm an art therapist, so I'm big on putting the art into it, any kind of media to it, you know? And so sometimes it's that scrapbook that just like literally speaks it all. You know what I mean? And that's where you just have the slideshow that the pictures just flip, you know, and maybe you have a voice behind it. And sometimes people don't mind, you know, not being on the camera, but having, you know, just speaking into a microphone and just kind of capturing a voice. And so, you know, that's so important in itself. We also connect with StoryCorps. So StoryCorps actually gives you an opportunity to have these conversations, whether they're hard talk conversations or just real life conversations, that then you're able to, that you record, and then you're able to send it into the library, which it's like amazing what they'll do with them. They'll make, you know, cartoons and things like that as well. So yeah, I think it's definitely a hard conversation, but there's a lot of light in reference to what your life is all about, as opposed to the end. Like, we're not really writing the end. Like, honestly, I hate no events I dislike, okay? But I dislike the obituaries that really start with like, he passed on, da 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 da. You know, if it's in the newspaper, like, okay. But if it's written up in your booklet, which is supposed to be your keepsake, it should be like chronological order of like, who you were born to, blah blah blah, and just the journey through each level of that, those times in your life, the different stages of life. You know, sometimes I say, let's just cut it down to like 4 stages. You know, and if we could cut it down to those 4 stages, you know, we could make it a little bit simpler for ourselves to look at things. But I definitely recommend trying to at least get a timeline together. You know what I mean? I think that's helpful.
I love that this is just a general tool you can do. Number 2, we already are starting to debunk the idea of what an estate is. And number 3, I know we tease about trust fund babies, but if you have anything, trust can really help to establish, and that's a whole different conversation. Wouldn't you want to? I don't know about you, but I do want to leave my babies with some legacy, so they don't.
Yes.
Because there are expenses post funeral. Oh, there are expenses. People don't realize you have to pay off a property. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
yes.
So
I think it's very important.
Honestly, Daria, I think we need to get rid of that myth. Like, people think, oh, they're trust fund babies. Actually, like, let's leave some trust fund babies so that we're not people literally are not scavenging around.
Oh, for sure. I think there's, honestly, in reference to the minority communities, I think it's very important to start that generational wealth. And how you do it, a lot of times could be just off of a simple paying a life insurance policy, and that being able to feed that next generation and that next generation. But if you put those proper guidelines around it, you'll be able to, direct really where those funds will go at the end of the day. How they'll be used, when they'll be used. You really can put some real, structure around specifically those things that are important to you. That you know each child, and you know what they'll do, what they don't do, what they can handle, what they can't handle. You really need to, evaluate your family as you're going through things. But I think a trust is definitely recommended as the go-to way to keep your estate out of probate court. But the other aspect of things is just recognizing that there is a financial aspect to it that can affect your ability to, go out and just get a lawyer to put it together. I think it's, and it's usually, what you have, how you have it, all that kind of stuff. And so really trying to figure out where your abilities to, have the full hold on what you have. And that's why taking the time to write out exactly all the things that you have of value to be able to put into that trust, right? And then once you have that all together, then trying to move forward and say to yourself, okay, I've got this. What things, do I want them, broken up or given to, or who you want them given to in reference to in your life. I think that you definitely want to make sure that when you're talking about money and your ability to maybe looking more into a will, or even doing a living will, or a holographic will, which is you writing it out first from your perspective, what you would want. Because sometimes it's just honestly hearing what my mother would have wanted, even if she didn't have the money to do, you know what I mean? But what she would have wanted, as opposed to what I gotta do. Right? Because I'm well, what would you like for your mother's service? Yeah, you don't want nothing. This is a need. I need to get, what do you tell me what I need? You know what I mean? So it's really one of those things where if you could hear that person's voice at that point in time, and it's hard to let that in at the,
it is hard at that moment when you're totally going through, I'm sitting here thinking about, oh my gosh, would it have been? And my mom talked about it a lot because she had a terminal illness. So we kind of knew a lot. But I knew a lot. But at the same time, I'm sitting here thinking, how would it have been if I knew the budget that she would have held for me on that funeral arrangement? Would she really have wanted that? Should I have gone for those extra flowers? I did, right? But some of it might have been my own imposition of my own desire of my own funeral that I thought about this a lot. Was it my own imposition of my own funeral onto hers? Right. Even though we planned a lot of it out, right? But some of it she wasn't even ready to talk about, to be honest with you. What do you want to talk about this stuff at your deathbed? It's very difficult, right? Just do what you think is right. it'll all be fine, right? That's a lot of what
Exactly.
families will hear. What's the
Yes.
minimal amount that will require you to do? And I just, for you. And it's like, wait a minute, this is for you too. Like,
Yes.
so,
Yes. I think that
yes.
the when it's not discussed, you do have like the impetus to try to like overspend, you know what I mean? Because you're trying to give back, you know, you're trying to do this, you're trying to make
And
sure
you're thinking it's the
you
final
weren't there.
party, right? It's the final
Hello,
hurrah
right?
of
It's
this
the
person's
whole
life.
right, exactly. And I think it's really recognizing, like for me, if you ask me like what type of funeral service that I would want, you know what I mean? I honestly feel like I'd want just a memorial service, like a direct cremation with a memorial service, or some kind of, you know, maybe, yes, something probably like that, you know, but simple, you know, but then it puts the meat, you put the meat into it, because now you have to really give reference to that life through, whether it be pictures or whether it be speeches or what people that, you know, speak at it, or your written obituary, or this, you know, slideshow that you make of yourself. One thing I'm going to be so mad about is, or my kids are going to be mad about, is like, I try to dodge photos at all times. You know, I'm like, you know, yeah. And you think to yourself, oh my God. And so as I'm doing other people's videos, I'm realizing I don't even have one of those photos. I got to get one of those. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just recognizing, you know, that I guess that the day will come. I think you're putting once you get it all in order, it's not like you got to continuously go back over that part of things. I think it's just going over your estate and how that is changing over time. And it's sometimes when we're talking about our estate, it could be how our kids are changing over time, you know, and what their capacity is or their incapacity is, in being able to deal in that moment. But there's a lot in reference to pre-arrangement, you know, every state works a little bit different. So you want to venture out and just make sure that you, you know, find out what your state laws are in reference to pre-arrangement, and specifically what they have to do and what they should be giving you at the time of making pre-arrangements. And then what are the guidelines? Like, you really should be paying like a trust into a trust that the funeral home might put together for you, or there's an outside company that the funeral home works with, or whatever the case may be, but it doesn't go to the funeral home's operating account. So it's just recognizing that you need to be able to put those, get a proper pre-need contract that kind of shows you exactly where those funds are going and how it's really going to be dispersed. And what's that final number at the end of the day? You know, I've seen some older people get taken advantage of over time. So it's really important for you to recognize, okay, if it's $102 a month and for the rest of my life, how long am I living? This is saying a little bit crazy. You know what I mean? It could be a little bit over and above, especially when you want like direct cremation, and going out to find out, well, in my area, what's the average price on a direct cremation? If it's just as simple as that. But if you wanted like a waiting period, a funeral service, and then you added on to that a full burial, and some people are like, and the horse and carriage, you know what I mean? And so it's making sure that you have the funds to make that happen. And if you can't, or if you're not in agreement with it and you don't care that what your kids do, you know what I mean, then they can always put those funds towards the services to, you know, add on to it or make it more speak to their heart, their wishes, their beliefs at the end of the day. As well.
Totally. I mean, this is all the idea that we at least start the rough draft somewhere. You know, so that the final copy at that end is like a little bit more solid. Because I just find that what ends up happening with a lot of families is you're in that motion after, you know, you're really like on the go, right, for that funeral, that period. It's almost like, I mean, it's another life event. It's a wedding. It's a wedding into, right. Oh my God. That's exactly. I was just about to say it's the wedding.
It's the wedding. And honestly, a good, maybe a week, you know, 5-7 days, you know, average, maybe a week and a half, you know.
With all the emotions of in a whole different lens.
And finances. And unexpectedly. Like
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
definitely not something like when people say, they don't like insurance companies, or they don't believe in insurance. I really say to myself, oh my, and say, yeah, I don't say that, but like, and you try to think to yourself, who did you run into? Because it's so
That's
important, if
exactly
nothing
what
else. At the end,
happens.
yeah, it did. Somebody got taken advantage of, if not them, their family member. And it's like, really, how do I now basically, you know, make sure that I don't get taken advantage the same way, but it's also that research of like really understanding what happened for that policy specifically, that company specific, and trying to just make sure that you understand what you're first pushing away in its entirety. I think that there are times that you should not get an insurance policy, and you making sure you're not at one of those age groups where it just doesn't make sense. But there's definitely tons to talk about when it comes to pre-arrangement. And, I'd love to come back and
Oh,
definitely keep
yes, we'll
talking about
definitely do.
different sections maybe of it, just to make
Yes,
it
we'll
simpler
definitely
to.
do the part two we'll do a part two because the prearrangement is such a top, right? I mean, we talked about the fact of like, how would it feel to do with this obituary, to write out, because that actually in so many ways can be a positive experience on how you are reflecting on your life. And then
Yep.
how you actually have, what do you really want at the end of the day? Like, it's just such a big. Then number two, the fact is when we talk about getting things in order, we're just saying, Daria, I think we don't all realize we all have some money somewhere we forget about.
Yeah.
I think about myself when I worked for a different job that had a different retirement plan that's sitting in South Carolina that I need to take care of, right?
I
So I'm
know,
not the
right?
only one, right?
Oh, me too.
You have
Oh,
to think
yeah.
we all have stories of when we job hopped and how there's money sitting in different accounts. It could even be $1,000. It could be 500.
I
That's not the
I
point,
had,
you know?
yes, it was, oh gosh, I remember being like, where? I have a what? Yeah, I know. And also when you when you go for a job, really knowing what's the package. I know, lots to talk about.
Lots, yes. And then of course we haven't even gotten to the topic of how to evaluate cremation versus burial,
Burial.
because I think a lot, and that in itself is a whole topic, because many people who have been bound and have bound themselves by religion are now facing a different lens, because we're thinking about what it really means, cost. We're also thinking about
Right.
space, and then
Yes.
and really allowing people to have a forum to give themselves permission to either like, just that idea of really having that conversation, I think is really important.
For sure. I'm definitely down for it, honestly, because I think there's so many things I want to be able to guide people through in that aspect of, from beginning, where you're at right now, all the way through. I think even the doula aspect in the end of life planning and understanding
Oh,
how that
totally.
works will be important too. So I can't wait for the next
I
time.
know, totally. Daria, before you sign off
For
for today,
sure.
can you share something you just want our audience to take away from today's conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I think that when we're talking about your life and taking it seriously, and this inevitability that kind of feels like it's going to creep up and just grab you, I think it's really recognizing that you're here for a purpose, and knowing what your purpose is going to make you feel more value in self, so that you can say to yourself, you know what, I want to reach out to somebody else and make sure that I bless somebody else with the things that I've learned, and then also that blessing in somebody else just keeps carrying on. So I think it's, when we're talking about your value systems, putting those things in line. Additionally, your life chronological timeline, getting that thing in order. It's going to speak to who you are. That's going to roll out into what your legacy will be beyond here. And then additionally, what work there is to do on your part moving forward to make sure that those things stay in line. So I just hope that I get to help you out at some point in time in that obituary course and get things started for you while it's to the forefront, you know. But
Totally.
I definitely appreciate the opportunity to really just speak about prearrangement and have it at a different forum at a different time when people might not be necessarily facing their passing, or even when they're facing it, to hopefully shine a different light on it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. This is Arthi with Light Up Your Life, and want to remind you again to stay humble and true to yourself through the lifespan. And why we have this conversation of death today is because it is actually life. And so we're going to continue on this journey. And next week we'll be talking about Ayurveda, which holds a lot of value in my own life. And as I learn, I really love it. And so that'll be next week's conversation. Have a great week, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.